Hello, good morning. I shall start then. Good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Sonia. I am actually currently doing my PG in Singapore, in National University of Singapore, Prosto. So with that, shall I begin? Or is there a short introduction from the floor? All right, thank you everybody for attending this short webinar. It's really very short. It's just like a simple introduction into dental macrophotography and a little journey on how I got into it. As well, hopefully I will be able to provide you with some useful tips on how to get started. With that, let's begin. Before I begin, I also like to thank PIDC as well as the organizing team for inviting me over to give this little short segment of sharing of my journey into dental photography. Okay, so today's session, the title of my presentation is actually called End in Mind. There's a reason why I call it End in Mind is because when you want to achieve something, you have to have a goal, an end goal on what you want to achieve. With that, it helps you to kind of plan your pathway and also in a way give you a really good guide onto how to reach to that end goal. Without an end goal, it's quite difficult to see the end and it's quite difficult to guide yourself as well. So for me, photography is actually a very important tool for documentation, communication, marketing, and also learning. With that, the objectives for today is how do I even get started? Meaning to say, what are the type of camera, lenses, flash or soft boxes. I'll be going into a little detail onto all of this and also to talk about what the button mean because in the camera itself there's so many buttons and often at time we get so lost and we do not know what to press or what settings to do. So I'll touch a little bit onto that. Simple techniques on how to produce photographs as you see in my background, as well as some creative dental photography because I feel that without some form of creativity or enjoying what you do, it's really difficult to progress as well. So hopefully I can help everyone to see how this whole learning process is actually fun. So with that in mind, I have a little group or perhaps a group called DXE, which I'll introduce a little bit. So I go by the emotion concept because this is kind of aesthetic, emotion in the sense that you capture the emotion. It's kind of fun in dentistry. With that said, that is just a side of it, right? So where it all began for me, I graduated in 2015 from PIDC. So I actually got interested in photography, and with that, throughout my career, I actually met a lot of people, and these are some of my friends who are really good in their work, aesthetic works, even their dental skill. So probably you guys can add them and talk to them and get more insight into dentistry, especially as undergrads. A lot of times we get so lost, especially when we graduate. So talking to peers and talking to your colleagues or seniors really helps you kind of guide your pathway. At the same time, you are able to gauge what is the real world. So you can probably add them on Instagram. I learned photography basically from these two people. So Dr. Kaios Ayala is actually an orthodontist. He actually came down to Malaysia, I think, in 2017 for a photography course. So the first photography course that I actually got exposed to was by this dental technician called Miladinov. You can actually Google him. He is a dental tech who makes beautiful, beautiful ceramic work. So from there, it got me interested. So he came down, gave a 2-day course, which hands-on as well as some theory. So from there, I slowly developed the interest and that's how I progressed. So the whole photography journey for me, it's basically a smooth sea never makes a skilled sailor. I actually spend quite a fair bit on equipment and try to figure out what is the best equipment for me, how does it improve or ease my basically my whole step of photography. How do I make sure that it's seamless in between my patients? So beauty lies in the eye of the camera holder. what I mean by this is basically you view through your viewfinder, you capture it, you have the end in mind, you capture that image, and so that is what your end goal is. It's all about, like I mentioned, the end in mind. So these photographs you see right in this background is basically the first time that I actually held a camera. Actually, it was an EPL7, a mirrorless camera, and this was during the Miladinov course. So with that, it gave me an insight, like if you put your heart and soul to it, and if you are interested, you can really just let yourself go and really venture and just open up your horizon, right? Sorry. Technical error. Okay. So with that, what camera do you buy? That's always the question that we ask. Even I ask actually to begin with. So what are the lenses do I get? What accessories to get? You know, at the end of the day, after asking all of this, the next question we always ask: where do I even begin? So I graduated in 2015 and I started working in the government. Even before in the government, in my year 5 in PIDC, I actually started documenting some of my cases. So I started with basically my mobile phone, which is a good tool because it gets you started from somewhere, right? So this was some of the photographs taken in PIDC as well when I was working in the government sector. From there, I actually tried to improve my work because, you know, looking and visualizing your work through a small mirror at that spur of time, you may actually miss out a lot of important details. So I like to take photographs, document them, go back, evaluate my work, see how I can actually improve, you know, on the next coming cases, or probably if I do note any issues with my work, I actually call back my patient and then make those necessary adjustments. So it's very important. So when I mean by me investing a lot, I really do invest a lot. Of course, it depends also on your budget. So you shouldn't just spend. You really need to know how much you can spend, and then from there do your research, because by doing necessary research you can actually save a lot of money. So it doesn't mean the most expensive equipments are always the best. It's all about understanding. So go to forums, read, and then ask your seniors what are their experiences, and then from there, you know, also my best friend is also Lazada or other Shopee. They also give a lot of good comments in the segment about the equipments that they use. So from there, do your research, calculate it, compare and contrast what are the benefits and what are the disadvantages of each equipment. So you don't actually waste too much unnecessary money buying on accessories that are actually would not give you the best outcome. So for today's outline, it's only 1 hour, so I can't really cover a lot, but basically just a little bit here and there, but I'll focus mainly on how to get started. I'll be talking about the usage and application of intraoral and also its creativity. The second one will be challenges in dental macrophotography. The third one, on choices, I'll be going into more details about this because it helps you to get started. The choices are, what kind of dental photography do you want to start with? The camera body, what are the types, lenses, flash, and also accessories. So for basic camera photography understanding, I can't go in depth, but I'll touch the important points, such as like there's things that you need to know like aperture, ISO, shutter speed, white balance, and also exposure compensation. Of course, subsidiary to that, there is also cross polarization and also TTL. The fifth one will be the manual mode setup, which to help you get started. What are my setups that I use, and from the little nitty details. So from there, with this, I would say recipe, it helps you to set up your camera and get going. From there, you will go in and learn in depth, and then slowly you modify the settings to your comfort. And then the sixth will be basic photography protocol. And then you have picture framing. I can't go into details about picture framing, but it's very important that you know about picture framing as well. Position and posture to get the right shot. The ninth was one of my favorite. It's actually Light macrophotography, and with that comes with creativity. So for usage and application wise, for me, after these few years of my working experience, it's very important that you document your cases because you really learn from it. And also it helps you to track the progress of your patients. The next thing is patient education and communication, which often the times the patient they're unable to see what is in their mouth intraorally, correct? So by taking pictures, you zooming in out onto your camera or onto your screen, it helps to educate your patients and make them realize the problem or the magnitude of the issue. With that, you create a good rapport with your patient as well. At the same time, it trains you to be confident of what you are going to propose to your patient. It helps you to identify things a bit better, or sometimes you may not be able to pick that up during your examination visit, but going back, looking at the photo, you will start to realize more things. Lab communication, this is crucial for prosthetic work. As well, the last but not least, I mean, not too important, this one, but basically the wow factor lah. So for documentation wise, this is what I mean by patient education and communication. So I have this case on the left, if you see on the screen, I had this patient coming in, not realizing the problem. So she is obviously a high caries rate patient, poor oral hygiene. So I actually educated her and show her, say, hey, these are the problems. You really got to improve your oral hygiene and also the caries rate. If not, it will be detrimental and she's going to end up having to pay more for more fillings. Today, I may be able to give her beautiful fillings, but those fillings will not last if she doesn't take ownership of the problem. So with that, documentation as well as patient education with photographs like this. So these are a few of the cases that I actually take and then go back and evaluate my work. So with documentation, of course, comes with how you frame your photographs. So in order to have good photographs, you need to be consistent as well. Again, patient education. You see like the picture below, patient has a lot of sublingual calculus. You really got to make them realize this is the issue. Or instances when your patient comes with grossly decayed teeth and they don't understand what's wrong. Things like this with picture, you blow it up and you show it to them. It helps you to educate your patient much better. For instance, when the patient comes with a large midline dystema, and then you want to document it, you can also tell the patient, hey, you have fluorosis. So I will need to replicate and mimic back this kind of details on your teeth. So by taking photographs, showing the patients, they are able to understand that these are the fine details that are in and on their teeth, and these are the fine details that you will replicate back to them. So they are also able to be aware, okay? So another thing is lab communication, where you can do digital smile design. Of course, it's not 100% accurate, but it's just approximate. It just helps you to plan. It shouldn't be a tool for you to push a certain treatment plan, but to help you to visualize the aesthetics without the patient being chair-side. So you can actually go back and just evaluate it. Of course, there are things like the e-lab. I personally have not gone deep into this yet, but it's definitely something out there that you can actually look into. It's more than that. It's quite technical. So for lab communication also is very important, with shade tabs and everything. It's aesthetics is very difficult because everybody has different eye for aesthetics. So with a camera, with the right setting and taking the right shade, you're able to communicate better with your technicians. Of course, last but not least, after doing nice work, you also would want to do some wow factor, right? To kind of show your patients. So this is one of few of my crown cases that, after issuing, it looks great. I just decided to take a few creative shots. It's fun for me, at the same time, fun for my patient. So it's just my way of communicating. Of course, a lot of times when you start to take out this big camera, your patient will start to roll and thinking, why? This is what my patient think, some of the time, but it depends on how you communicate and engage your patient to understand the value of these photographs. Of course, some take it to the certain extent of aesthetics. So this is one of my juniors who decided to take it to the next level. So with great lengths, and these are the photographs taken with it. The second part of this lecture will be challenges in dental macro photography. Consistency and reproducibility is very important because you want your photographs to be consistent and also reproducible. Therefore, you can actually note the changes or what are the it's easy for you to kind of reposition your photographs and evaluate them much better. Settings, you also want a setting which is also pretty much consistent. You don't want to keep changing and toggling, therefore affecting your picture value. Flash and light source is also very important for you to understand, because with inadequate light source, therefore your pictures may be inadequately lighted because you're doing macro photography, which you're going really close. So you really need good light source to illuminate the intraoral environment, which is dark. It's different from portrait or landscape where you have natural light source, correct? Timing, because we are constantly working back to back, right, patients? So timing is also very important, that you time yourself. You don't want to be dwelling too much of time, stretching your patient's mouth. It can be very uncomfortable for your patients, for yourself, as well for your dental assistants, because sometimes we share dental assistants, right? So you need to be able to be independent when you take photographs. You need to be chop, you need to set yourself within 1 minute or 2 minutes. You got to take all the shots because you really don't have much time to waste. And most importantly, positioning is important because you don't want to be leaning on the patients, falling over the patients. It can be very uncomfortable, not only for the patient but for yourself as well. So you want to create a good distance, working distance, as well as safe parameter where you don't violate, or encroach onto the patient's space. So a very hot tip for me is that use the right equipment and settings to get you started. Practice. I cannot emphasize how important it is for you to practice. The very beginning, the very baby steps are very difficult. You will start to realize, oh, your hands are tired. You feel like you can't do it. It's too heavy. A lot of frustration. But with those frustration, it gets you to the next step because you start to realize the mistakes that you make. And with those mistakes, it helps you to improve further. So just like how babies, you're born not able to run, you crawl first. Even before you crawl, you need to be able to place your hands and feet on the ground right before you can crawl. So with that, practice makes perfect. And then understanding your equipment. I'm also still understanding I'm still learning about my equipment to this day. I'm not a pro, but I learn as I go and grow and improve with time. And last but not least, you really need to enjoy what you're doing. If you really don't enjoy what you're doing, it's very difficult. So the choices. So we'll go ahead with that. I started out with an Olympus EPL7. I did not buy this camera for the purpose of dental macro photography, to be honest. It was actually a camera that I bought that, when I travel, I want to take photographs rather than relying on my camera. So as I mentioned earlier, I went for a course by Mila Dinoff, and I'm like, I read a line about it, like, why can I use my mirrorless camera to produce the same outcome? So by reading a little bit more, yes, I was able to do it. So the whole class had a DSLR. I was the only one who came in with a mirrorless. So everyone had the big boy, I had the baby tiny, and then everyone kind of just snuggle and like how small my camera is. And at the end of the course, my camera was able to take beautiful photographs. So my take home and one liner from is know your camera, read a little bit more, understand what your camera can do, and then from that you are able to produce what you need to produce. So this is my initial setup. There are things like dental mobile photography, which I started off with, and then I move on to DSLR or mirrorless. There's also something called as the smart dental cameras, which are specifically made for dental photography. Other than that, there are different shots where you take like the intraoral shots, extraoral shots, creativity shots, as well as lab photography. So can you tell? This is actually taken with a smartphone, which is with my iPhone. So with mobile photography, yes, you can take really creative shots, nice shots. However, it has its major limitations. Let me show you. So it looks great, it's beautiful, but it's very limited to just the anterior zone. A lot of times with dental macro photography, right? If you notice, later I have a comparison side by side. It gives you a fish eye effect, which means there's a lot of distortion. Therefore, there's very minimal value to how you can use this photograph to evaluate the ratio, the golden proportions if you're going to do with aesthetics. Or if you're going to go in and get a consistent photo, it's very difficult because each each camera has its own set of settings depending on the lens. So they have different magnifying factor. So there's something called as also the Smart Light Mdp, where it's by Star Italiano, where you actually attach your phone and actually illuminate. So rather than relying on your camera light source, which is very minimal, this smart light actually has multiple LED lights to kind of shine and illuminate the intraoral environment so that you're able to capture images well. So my advice is, if you're tight on a budget and you want to start somewhere, yes, mobile photography can be a good start, but ultimately, if you want to progress, you probably need to invest in a DSLR or mirrorless. I actually compared side by side what's the difference between mirrorless and DSLR. Image stability wise, they're both pretty similar. You have to look, of course, into their specifications. Durability wise, it depends on how you handle your camera. If you don't take care of your camera well, you just put them anywhere at a moist environment, a mirrorless or DSLR would not sustain. You would just start having fungus and it would just spoil easily. Of course, the mirrorless is light, it's compact, it shoots faster. The video quality wise, to be honest, it depends again on your camera model. After those few years of using my mirrorless, to be honest, I prefer the DSLR because of the grip. The mirrorless is very small, and trying to have a good grip out from it, it's quite difficult, and I feel there's a lot of strain on my wrist. With the DSLR, I have a better grip of the body, which gives me better stability in the long run, and it's much more comfortable. In terms of battery life, of course, the DSLR has better battery life because the batteries are much larger. But again, with the improvement of technology, the batteries usually tend to outlive. The times, it depends on how much you charge as well. Lens choices for DSLR, they have more third parties as well as more choices compared to the mirrorless. So with that, here's is a side-to-side comparison. So on the left corner, you can see this taken with my Nikon D7 200, which is a mid-range body with a twin flash, and then below is with my mirrorless. They are quite similar, quite comparable, but if you do look, the picture, the Olympus picture gives you a little bit more of a saturated value. That's also dependent on your camera as well as your flash, your light source. So if you see, the Shofu Eye Special is actually a dental smart camera. And then the one on the bottom right is taken with my iPhone X. So you can see the fish eye effect. With the fish eye, it blows up the anterior and then it kind of constricts the posterior, which is not what it is in the mouth. So with pictures like this, it gives you a false impression. Therefore, it's only useful for the anterior, but I feel that if you're going to do more in that and you want pictures with better consistency and also reproducibility, I would suggest to go ahead with the DSLR instead, or either the mirrorless. So this is the smart dental camera. This is useful, for example, where if you're going in for surgery or you want to maintain good hygiene. Some people are worried if they wipe their camera with this alcohol swab, it may actually damage the buttons. So they came out with these smart dental cameras. But for me, I usually could wipe and swipe down my camera with the dental wipes, which is non-alcohol. That's one way where you can maintain the hygiene of your cameras. So these are the various brands that are out there. So you have the entry level, the mid-range, and the high range. So the entry level, the difference, of course, is just like iPhone, right? You have the iPhone X, the iPhone Pro Max, iPhone Pro or Plus, whichever. So it's basically the specs, the specification. So the high range will definitely have more spec. The mid range has probably a moderate, and entry level probably limits you into into changing some of the settings. If you ask me honestly, the entry range and the mid range, price range wise, is not much of a difference. There are certain settings like the white balance. The mid range allows you to change, allows you to kind of just adjust the settings a bit better. The entry level gives you presets. So I don't like to rely on the presets. Therefore, if you were to, in my opinion and my advice, I would say if you have a chance, you're going to start somewhere, go for the mid range. The entry level cameras tend to be also a bit smaller and compact. And I don't like this because it has a bit of an imbalance when you start to fit in your lens. It becomes a bit heavy in the front. So you get this downward tipping. It gets a bit difficult to kind of balance your camera. So the mid-range is kind of in between, gives you a good grip and a good balance. It's much more stable. So another thing to look at is crop frame or full frame. So that's something you need to know as well. What do you mean by crop and full? So it depends on your image sensor, correct? So let's think about it. If you have a patient in retracted view, this is what it looks like. On the left, it would be a full frame. On your right would be a crop frame, assuming that you're standing at the same distance. So your image sensor can only capture that much for a crop frame. A full frame will give you a larger crop, correct? Which is quite simple. Same thing again. This is a full frame. With the standing at the same distance, your crop frame will give you this. So in order to capture the image on the left with a crop frame, you probably need to stand a little bit further. So I did a summary between crop and full. Crop frame sensors are usually smaller, of course, that's why they're cropped. They're cheaper. The lens are also cheaper. The image tends to be magnified, and the full frame are lesser. So full frame cameras are usually used for like landscape, if you're going to go for portrait, studio shoots. But honestly, in dental macro photography, a crop frame camera is quite sufficient. Need not necessary to spend unnecessary on a full frame camera. In terms of lenses, it depends on your on the company. Canon or either Nikon or Fujifilm, they all come up with different lenses, correct? So this is where the confusion comes in as well. Do I get a 60? Do I get an 85? Do I get 100 or 105? A lot of times people will recommend the 100 mm that I will actually explain in detail in a bit which to choose. So the most important thing to note that is the focal length. A lot of times people have this misconception on focal length that is actually the length size, but it's actually not. In detail, it's actually the optical distance to when the light rays actually converge to form a sharp image on the sensor itself. What do I mean by this? So I did a little schematic diagram here to kind of show you, illustrate what is the difference. So with a 200mm macro lens, if you see on the top right, the longer the focal length, usually the narrower the field of view. So meaning to say you really zoom in, so you have a higher Mac. Whereas if a 60mm lens, you tend to have a wider field of view, so it's further away. So can you imagine a 200 is just like a binoculars, you really zoom in. A 60mm is basically slightly further away, so you zoom out. So this is what I mean by focal length. So the image here shows you example like a 200mm, so you get a higher Mac within that image sensor. So again, with different camera, they come out with different lengths. You have, for Nikon, they have the 105, the 85, 60 or 40. These are all macro lens. For Canon, you have the 180, 165. And then the Tamron, Sigma, and Tokina, they're all third-party lens. From my experience with third-party lens, hasn't been very pleasant. They are actually not that cheap as well. So for me, my advice is that if you're going to get a Nikon camera, stick back to Nikon. If you're going to go for Canon, go back to Canon, because a third party, you do know sometimes they have issues with focusing. It gets quite frustrating. So I also will show you a breakdown on the price in comparison, you will start to realize it's actually not much of a difference. So the longer the focal length, of course, is slightly heavier, and the further you are from the patient, so it gets a little bit difficult, especially if you're a bit shorter. Like for me, I have to actually kind of position my body back and forth just to get to the right, to get my picture framing well. So this is a Nikon 85mm and 105. Honestly, I don't see much of a difference. It's probably I just need to position my body slightly further back, not much actually, so it's very, very insignificant. Of course, there's a difference why there's an 85mm lens, and it's also why there's a 105mm lens. I'll talk about it. So my choice and my preference is actually a mid-range crop sensor D7 200 or D7 500 with an 85mm lens. The lens is definitely so much cheaper. It's lighter. Although the setback, it needs a little bit more light, but that's not a big issue when you can adjust the power of your light source. The 105 is definitely more expensive, heavier. I mean, it's a little bit well illuminated, but I think by understanding your camera settings and your light source, you can actually control it quite well. So have you ever wondered all these little details that you see on your camera? I actually learned about this not long ago, maybe about a year ago or so. And if you start to realize that all this thing actually means something. Okay, so if you see for the Nikon, there's something called as the micro. The micro means macro photography. There's something called as the zoom lens and prime lens, which I'll talk about it in the next slide. So with these details, you really need to pay attention as well, because if you go to any supplier and say, I want to get an 85mm lens, they will not know that you're actually looking for a macro lens. They might actually give you a prime lens, which I'll talk about it in a bit. What is the difference between prime and also zoom lens? So if you see here, they are both 85, and you can see the difference in size, correct? So the one on the right is actually known as a prime lens. So a prime lens is actually a fixed focal length. They don't allow you to actually change in terms of their focal length. So it's not very versatile. Whereas the zoom lens on the left has variable in focal length. So it's very, very versatile, and it's specifically for macro photography. The one on the right is more for landscaping, where you want to take portrait shots or landscape shots. So with that, it's very important for you to know the difference, and especially when you buy lenses. So you can go to Nikon USA. They have really good articles and also tips and techniques in understanding the different setups, or what do you mean by AFS, what do you mean by 85mm, what do you mean by different focal length. It's very good detail. So that's where I actually learn most of my stuff from as well. So with that, you need to understand there's zoom lens and also there's prime lens. With these lenses also come in, why do you have 85, why do you have 60, and why do you have the 105? So they are meant for different camera bodies. From the very beginning of the lecture, I mentioned that there's something called as the crop frame. There's also something called as the full frame. So in this derivation, FX means full frame body, full frame camera. DX means crop frame. These terms are meant for Nikon, right? So let's just break it down. So you do know the camera has both the crop and also the full. The lens as well. So there are lenses that are made for crop frame camera. There are lenses that are made for full frame camera. So the first ones are full frame lens, FX lens for full frame body. So you can imagine if your camera sensor is a full frame and you use a full frame lens, you maximize the benefit of it, correct? The second one is that imagine that you have a crop frame camera, the sensor is so small, and you put a full frame lens. It doesn't make sense because your sensor is already so small, and your lens will not, you will not be able to maximize the usage of your full frame lens. Therefore, buying a full frame lens not only is expensive, you cannot maximize its usage. So therefore, you are actually indirectly wasting your money. So if you have a crop frame lens and a crop frame body, it's already cropped and it's meant for that, so it's useful. Now, on the other hand, when you have a crop frame body sensor, the sensor is so huge, correct? And if you place in a crop frame lens, in a way that your camera can auto adjust and recognizes lens because based on its adaptation, it actually adapts it straight into a crop frame. So with a full frame body, it can act as both a full frame camera as well as a crop frame. But in this sense, if you're buying already a full frame body, it's so expensive and you're getting a crop frame lens, therefore it doesn't match. So you need to know what is the usage of your camera. If you're just going to mainly focus on just photography, dental macro photography, go ahead with a crop frame lens and get a crop frame body. You save so much money with that. So that's something I learned along the way and by comparing all this. So my preference is actually Nikon. The reason is Nikon has more choices compared to Canon. The Canon doesn't give you an 85 millimeters. So you're either start with 100 or either a 60. So with Nikon, I can choose a 85 millimeter for my crop frame body and a crop frame lens. I save so much more money with this. It's very valuable. The next thing that you need to get is your flash. So there are a lot of questions people ask me, do I get a twin? Do I get a ring flash? So it depends on your usage. So for dental students, to keep things simple, my honest opinion is to get a ring flash. I'll show you also a compare and contrast in the difference in pricing and usage. So for extraoral diagnosing, some people like to use the twin flash, but honestly, if you know your light source, you need not necessarily to rely on a twin. So for extraoral, for creative shots, you want to have beautiful lighting, you can opt to go for a studio flash. But as a dental student, we don't have that space because studio flashes need space. Intraoral aesthetics, some people use the twin flash, they say it gives you better aesthetics. Honestly, I've compared both. It depends on how you control your light source and also the accessories you use. So if you choose the wrong setting and with the twin flash, you will not be able to get that results. So to keep things simple, the ring flash is really the go-to, less of a headache. Now there's something called as the ugly maker by Scott Scalby. Have you ever seen that little pop-up thing that you have on your camera? This is called the ugly maker. What I find it cute and funny is that they call this ugly maker is because this flash is so harsh, unflattering, that it gives the photographer, it makes the photographer frustrated. Therefore, they have to buy accessories to make their photograph look better. So that's why they call this the ugly maker. Of course, if you're using this, you leave your patient blinded for a few seconds. It's so harsh. So don't ever use this to take photographs. It's terrible. Okay, so macro flash. Okay, if you understand why it's called macro flash, it's because you're taking macro photography. So you're just focusing on the intraoral environment. It's so dark inside. So if you see, right, the flashes are placed very close to the lens. Therefore, it helps to provide sufficient lighting towards the intraoral environment. That's why it's called macro flash. And also, macro flash is useful for if you're going in really close, like insects, or like if you're going to take close details, you really want to get good illumination. Therefore, it's called macro flash. Sorry. Okay, so this is comparison. This is by Giovanni. It's one of the dental photography textbook to compare and contrast what's the difference. If you ask me, honestly, the twin flash on the right and the ring flash, really, there's not much details. So if you see, right, there's a difference also in the color. The color difference not only is influenced by your type of camera, but it's also influenced by the type of flash. So some flash gives you a bit more of a bluish outlook, so it looks cold. Some flash gives you a bit more warmth. That depends on your filter of your flash. So you got to experiment it halfway. Okay, so this is the compare and contrast, right? So if you're going to a studio, it's very expensive. If you're going for the twin, you can see the price range is almost $1,000 over. It's very expensive for dental students. You're not earning anything. It's just not very friendly lah, pocket or wallet friendly. I would say make your life easy. Go ahead with the ring flash. My favorite is basically the Viltrox ring. I don't know whether it's still in production, but it's been working for me so well for almost 3 years, 4 years, and I love it. So the Viltrox is my ultimate favorite. So I compared here, twin and ring. You guys can take a screenshot if you really want it. So ultimately, my favorite is the ring. The next thing, the accessories you need to get is basically retractors, mirrors. Contrasters are optional. Retractors are useful because it gives you good retraction so you can take your shots well. I personally like to use these retractors from Chris Chang. He is actually a Taiwanese orthodontist that I learned ortho from. This CC's retractor has both the cheek retractors as well as the lip bumper, so it doesn't interfere or with my insertion of mirrors. So mirrors wise, there are cheap mirrors and there are expensive mirrors. They are rhodium plated, they're also stainless steel mirrors. There's a difference between these two and why the difference in price. The rhodium plated mirrors tend to be clearer and they are less scratch resistant. They are more scratch resistant compared to the stainless steel ones. So with that, I would say as dental student, you can actually opt to buy the stainless steel ones. Take good care of it so it doesn't scratch easily. It's the way you handle it. Even rhodium mirrors can get scratched if you don't take care of it well anyways. So the problem with fogging of mirrors, I can't talk in the detail about this, but there's something called as this where they have fan that try to kind of defog your mirrors. And one tip that I learned is you can use your three-way syringe to blow air, or either to soak your mirrors in warm to slightly hot water. Make sure not to burn your patients to prevent fogging. So Christian says to document your case step by step is the key to success. So for mirror wise, this is one of my friend, Dr. Abdullah, who actually customized some stainless steel mirrors. Is very, very friendly. So I love these mirrors. I do use them routinely when I was back in Malaysia. So you can actually contact him and get the mirrors from me. I don't think it's very expensive. So yeah, these are one of the mirrors. So that mirror is amazing is because it has both the buckle and also the occlusal view. It's easy and workable. So you don't need to have multiple mirrors. It's just one. So I compared and contrast the mirrors, the Chris Chang, the expensive one, versus my friend's mirror, which is stainless steel. Honestly, I don't see much of a difference. It's at the end of the day, the photograph, the picture value or the photo comes out from your effort on how you control everything, right? So you can buy the most expensive equipments, but if you don't practice and you don't learn how to take the photographs well, you will not be able to produce photographs like that. So additional fun things are like light modifiers, filters or bracket. This is something that you can play. Lazada, and of course you have this expensive LumiQuest. I personally love this middle one, which is the mini softbox. You can get it from Shopee or Lazada. The poor man's LumiQuest is using cardboard. I made it at 150. So by understanding all these bands and lights, I was able to create. So this is taken with that 150 cardboard. You can definitely see through the eye reflection. It's definitely from that cheap cardboard, but the photographs come out well. It's all about understanding the light and angle. So these are more creative shots, not very applicable to dental, but it just makes my work fun, right? So light modifiers, this is one of my favorite. There's a difference. So let me show you. The top photograph is taken with a ring flash by the ring flash that I usually use. The bottom one is taken by a donut flash, which I love, and it's really cheap. So here again, on the left is a ring flash. On the right is basically with a light modifier. So you can definitely see the difference. So these two photographs is both taken with my my donut flash, which is the light modifier. So you can really see the picture comes out really nice. It's not as harsh because the light kinds of filter off. So this again, on the left is a ring, and on the right is my donut flash. It's so beautiful because it cuts out any harsh light. So the pictures comes out really soft and nice. And at the same time, I'm able to appreciate the little details on the tooth. They're both same photographs, by the way. Same patient, same day, just different light source, same camera, same lens, just different light modifiers. So this is one of those that are taken with my donut flash. So this is just really eye candy. This is composite restoration done. So this is also by donut flash. So you can definitely see with this donut flash, it cuts out all this unnecessary light, harsh light that is on to the tooth itself. So you get to appreciate all these fine details. So these are a few of the photographs taken with my donut. So you can see on the bottom left, the edge tooth surface. Can you see that round donut? That is basically my donut flash, right? This again with donut flash. So contrasters, what's the beauty about contrasters is that you're just able to block out an unwanted anatomical structures around like tongue, or either to just give you a very nice black canvas. So this is the difference between with contraster and without contraster. You can get them online. The one on the left is something that I created. It's a flexible black plate that actually folds in very nicely. Yes, I do sell them. If you're interested, you can probably liaise with Nolan or the organizer of this group. Alternatively, you can get them on Lazada or Taobao. They have beautiful ones. It's just understanding what you need and what you got to do to create those photographs. Okay, so with that basic camera photography understanding, I can't go into detail about this because of short of time. So basically the things you got to know is basically there's ISO, the shutter speed, there's basically your aperture and your light source. Learn all of this from the Nikon USA webpage. You will get a really good, clear idea. And with Google these days, everything is online. You can learn everything online. You need not necessarily go for photography class. Okay. So manual mode setup, I'm just going to give you my setup, which I learned. So these are the settings. You have the ISO 300. You can go to 200. Again, go and read about it and you understand a bit more. Then you can play with these settings much better and actually adjust it according to your camera and light source. So for portrait, it's usually f10. You can go lower to f8 maybe. Intraoral shots are usually standard. So you can see I don't change my settings much. The only thing that I change are basically my f-stops, right? So there are different modes here. Honestly, don't bother. Just go to the manual mode, set everything up and you're good to go. The only things that you got to change is basically your aperture. That's all, which is your f-stop. So basic photography protocol, when I first started, it was very difficult because I didn't know what shots to take. So what I used to do was to write out on a piece of paper or print out, stick it by your dental chair. So every time you're going to take photographs, you follow this protocol step by step. Once you practice a few times, it's inbuilt in you already. You will get the motion quite fast. So take the effort, write it down, the sequence that you're going to take, practice those sequence, and you will never miss a shot. Because you don't want to be calling your patients back to just retake those shots. It's very frustrating. So you want to take it there and then, and make sure you have a good protocol that you practice. So for portraits, these are the few portrait shots. Of course, you can create your own, customize your own. This is not the fixed way of doing it, but this is what I used to do. Okay, so the intraoral shots, all of this were basically taken just in 1 minute. If you practice, you can do it in 1 minute. Of course, don't stress yourself too much, right? Practice and you will get there. So some of the portrait shots, I will not go into detail because this is quite technical. So one of the tips that I can use is that you have within your sensor, right? There's this little red dot. It helps you to focus and it also helps you to kind of orient your picture so that you get a very consistent photo. So do use this little features within. So as a summary, these are my checklist for intraoral and portrait shots. This comes the fun part, which I love a lot. So light macro photography and creative macro photography. So back in those days when I graduated, I loved to do wax ups. So I used to take pictures of my wax up and I'm like, oh wow, you know, this looks not too bad. But now after a few years of practicing wax ups, when I look back at my photograph, I'm like, oh no, my anatomy was definitely wrong. It's not right. I could have improved here. So with this, right, it helps you to improve on knowing what you need to do and how to improve from there. So these are some of my wax up in my early years. So these are my wax up now that I do in my residency. And, you know, from there, I evaluate my work. And I'll see, oh, these are the places that I need to change. These are things I need to do. So by doing this, right, you not only you enjoy your work, you take photographs of your work creatively. It's fun. It kind of rewarding as well. It gets you to evaluate your work, right? So it's a whole process of enjoying what you're doing. So by all these are just creative shots. It's just how I create all those illusion, like how you see on Instagram. It's just something fun, right? Or like instance, a vernier case that came back from my lab techs, and then how I take these photographs. At the same time, my lab technician also becomes very enthusiastic to produce better work because they know that I'll be taking photograph of the work. Everything will be within that macro lens. So like instance, in these shots, I go back and tell my technician, hey, you have little bubbles here, some areas here, you probably need to patch it up or change. So these are the things that, you can do and actually see when you take photographs, because you're able to blow it up into a big screen and evaluate your work. So these are my lab photography setup. Very simple. I still use my Olympus EPL7 quite often. Yeah. So this is how I do it. A very simple setup anywhere, anyhow. So just basically knowing the setup and knowing what to do, and this is the outcome of the photograph of the shot from that day, without any I did not do any modifications or any post-processing. This is how it comes out from the camera. So I have some juniors from Masa. They came over to my house when I was in Malaysia, and they started experimenting. You can follow them. They're really humble people, really fun bunch. So this was some of the photographs that they took from that day. So understanding where the light source is basically creativity, correct? So with that, these are some of the shots done. These are all ceramic work built up by technician. He did it for fun, basically. So I just took some photographs. So these are cross-polarized shots. Just some way of me expressing my creativity, that's all. So this is basically a session where they came over to learn. And then within that 10-minute session, by understanding, they were able to produce shots like a pro. Basically, learn, practice, and teach. That's why I always tell my juniors or whoever, keep learning, practice, and then you teach each other. From there, you learn your mistakes a bit better, and then you will know where are the gaps to be filled out. Okay, so it doesn't just stop here. Of course, there's some post-production and documentation that you need to do. So the minute that you've cropped your photo is already post-production, correct? So what I mean by post-production and documentation is that it helps you to kind of make your whole documentation neat. So another way that I use my photographs is to evaluate my work, as I mentioned earlier. So this is one of the case. I think it was a 8-year-old child came in with a trauma and fractured her 2-1, the maxillary left central incisor. So I went back and evaluated my work. So I superimposed it. So in order to create superimposition like this, your picture framing has to be very consistent and reproducible. If not, if you don't take it right, it's very difficult for you to reposition it. So I went back, evaluated it on the computer, and then I was like, hey, I probably got to go back, maybe round off the distal incisor line angles a little, the distal incisor angle a little bit. But is it necessary? No, it's just a way for me to critique my work, that's all. So this is another case where I did my trying. I wanted to evaluate how much of material that I need to add. So this gives us an idea, rather than evaluating in the patient's mark can be quite difficult. So after a day's work, you go back home, relax, and slowly look at your work a bit better. So with that, you can organize it neatly, and then it's very important that you take consistent photograph, and it's easy for you to evaluate. With that, you are able to document it well, right? So with that, a journey from the drawing board doesn't stop there. Of course, you have to see beyond what your eyes can see, right? So with that, appreciate the work that you do. You get to improve on the work that you've done, and then you from there you progress. So my purpose of sharing is that it's really not a secret. I usually share because this is a learning journey that I feel that it gets you started, and I wish that I was younger, that I had all this information done or information told to me rather than go through the whole journey. So for you as an undergrad, it's important for you to just take this, go back, read more, and then you come up with your own formula, compare and contrast all of this information, and then from there, come up with your own setup. By this process, you are able to learn much better about your camera. At the same time, you are able to improve really, really fast. So again, a recap, this is my settings. So a summary of equipment. For intraoral shots, these are the things you need. You need a retractor. Contrasters are optional. Intraoral mirrors, and also a macro flash, twin or either ring. So this is a summary of the equipments that I use. The prices may change now, I'm not too sure, but this is just a summary. So if you're going to go for mobile, basically you just have your camera, right? And you need a light source. It's either you go for lamp view, or you go for small light. If you're going for mirrorless, there are other brands. Of course, there's like Sony, you have Olympus, you have Fujifilm. So it depends. You got to find out what are the available lenses. So you can definitely see the mirrorless cameras have very limited lens or third-party lens, and they're very expensive. For the DSLRs, you have more ranges, you have better choices, and they are much cheaper. With that, these are the few contacts that I go to. You can contact them. I have no any financial ties with them or anything. This is just where I got my details from and where I bought my stuff from. Okay, so with that, I end my 1 hour session. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that was beneficial for everybody. Yeah. Any questions that I can, any burning questions that I can answer? Or did you all have? Are we taking questions? If that's all, then I suppose I will just end my session from here. The organizers. Oh, so there's a question here. What are your thoughts about Macrography twin flash or R1C1? Macrography twin flash, okay, so I've used the R1C1 before, and I've also had a little experience, or very little experience with the twin flash, Macrography twin flash. Honestly, they work fine. The R1C1 is very expensive. The Macrography is a bit more affordable. However, if you have experience taking with a twin flash intraoral shots, like example, the molars, right, or you're going to take a occlusal shot, you really got to position those twin flash properly in order for you to eliminate your intraoral environment. So to make things easy, and also to reduce the amount of movements that you need to make to change your camera settings during the whole process, I would say just go ahead with the ring flash. It is much better and much more convenient. So the next question is that how would you ensure the same progressive and so do you remember just now I mentioned to you when you look through your viewfinder that these little grids and boxes, I usually rely on those to make sure that my orientation is correct. So I usually have a fixed set or fixed way of doing things. So you got to create your own protocol, right? So if you see the little red dot, it's also a way where it helps me to reposition. So example, if I'm going to take a anterior shot, my red dot is either for the same patient or any patient, I'll usually try to focus either at the incisor edge of tooth 1-1, this is the maxillary right central incisor. So usually that's my go-to point. And also another way that I make sure all my pictures are oriented the same is that you have those horizontal lines. I kind of make them parallel to the occlusal plane, or I use that as a zenith, or maybe that's where my zeniths are and that's where my incisor edge are. So I get them all aligned. So that's how I usually get them all pretty much aligned. Any other questions? I'd like to know for a newly joined end-up, what would you think can start documenting with these amazing specs given the stress? So if you're asking me about time constraint, right, is practice. So during breaks or during your lunch hours, you can actually practice with your colleagues. So what's interesting here is that when your colleagues are taking picture of you, you understand what your patient go through. So with that, right, you are a bit more kinder to your patient because you know when you retract, and then if you're in your patients, you usually understand how they feel. Therefore, it helps you to be a better clinician. So I would say practice. Don't, I mean, of course, the first few times you will practice on your patient, but ultimately practice on yourself is on each other is much better. So you time yourself, then your colleague can give you feedback on how the way it was retracted was correct or wrong, comfortable, not comfortable. So with that, practice your colleague first before you go on your patients. If not, it can be very stressful. Olympus EPL 9, and I was wondering since you have 7, what is that? What's it? Yes, so for those settings, right, I actually learned those initial settings from Miladinov. With those settings, then from there, I slowly learned about the different settings, what were they for, why was it ISO 200, why the shutter speed had to be 1/125. You got to do a lot of learning yourself. Of course, the course can give you a lot in details, but going in the first time, there's so much you can capture. To be honest, the first course I went, I was so lost that I really didn't understand what he was talking about. I had to go back and read again. And then I went for the second course by Dr. Kaios Ayala. Honestly, I was still lost, but I had a better grip of it because I understand it a little bit better. Then from there, I go back and read again. So it helps you to kind of strengthen your knowledge and understanding. So I would say, yeah, do your research and read about it. An app you use to analyze a pic. I just use Keynote. You can use PowerPoint. No special app actually. Hey Sean. Which donut would you recommend other than Krispy Kreme? I mean, just Lazada or Shopee, you just type there donut ring flash, you'll come out. It's very cheap only. It's like maybe 25 ringgit or 50 ringgit. I can't remember. Yeah. F22, F32, those are apertures basically. It depends on your camera also and your lens, right? So you need to check. Tips and tricks. Yeah, Mola from side view. Yeah, you just use the correct camera. I mean, just use the correct what you call it, retractor as well as mirror. You're able to capture those shots. So if you use a mount mirror, your mount mirror view is so small. You probably want to use like those mirrors I show you by Dr. Abdullah, those long mirrors. You're able to capture it much better lah. And also a ring flash would really save you so much of a headache and hassle. So I'm all for Viltrox ring flash. I don't get anything from them, but it's just my personal experience after trying so many brands and also flashes. That's my favorite. No, it's not consistent. If you use a mobile camera, it's not consistent at all. It gets you started, but I would not encourage you to rely on it. No, definitely not. Mobile camera photography is definitely something that I don't encourage. There's no consistency. Yeah. So if you change your phone, then your pictures are all different again. So you want something to be consistent throughout your career, right? So that you can evaluate. So imagine if today you take with iPhone, then tomorrow you change your phone, or 1 year later you change it to a Samsung, then your pictures are different again. So it's very difficult for you to kind of evaluate it. So with that, I suppose, thank you everybody for listening. Any questions, you can probably email me, or yeah, just drop me a DM if I don't reply. I'm so sorry. But yeah, I'll try to answer everybody's questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sonia, and
Bye-bye.
thank you to all the participants for attending our webinar. So we'll just want to inform you that the e-certificates will be emailed within a week. So to follow, just follow us on Instagram at PREC Virtual Circle for more content like this. Take care and stay safe, everyone.
Bye. Stay safe, everybody.